to Grid Live Wrap-Up. Christopher Bell is back with a win in the win column, getting it done in a chaotic Bristol night race, the first endurance race before the Bathurst 1000 for the Repco Supercar Series at the Bend. Saw a dominating performance by Brody Kostecki and Todd Hazelwood, plus MotoGP in San Marino. A non-Marc Marquez driver winning that sprint race. So Mark made the statement in the Grand Prix. And of course, World Rally Championship Rally Chile underway right now. Hello, welcome. I'm Joe San Diego. With me, Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight, Tanner Smith, editor of the Pit Box Press, and Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com. Encourage everyone to check out Matthew's article on Grid Network TV right now. GridNetworkTV.com. There you can find his article recapping the Bristol night race, plus all past articles, including coverage from Portland during the IndyCar NASCAR race weekend. And a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network every month through Patreon. Link in the video description. And you could do a one-time investment through YouTube Super Chat. Buy me a coffee. Get your name on the leaderboard. The leaderboard yesterday was something else, Tanner and Matthew. We saw a chaotic race. One that made you thought, we talked about on Grid Life After Dark.
We thought. We were
tire wear. From every indication on Friday, we saw that we were going to have a race with maybe very little tire fall from Friday. But sure enough, 30 laps in, we had it. The results, a race that I would compare to the old Bristol 2007 before we had the repave, the progressive banking, and then I think what has sort of been a controversy of what is the Bristol racetrack like. 14 cautions for 137 laps. 14 cars on the lead lap at the end of the night. The short runs again. The longest run was 83 laps. Not to mention the aggression we saw. The bumper was used a ton by everyone, Tanner. Did the Bristol night race prove that NASCAR, Goodyear, and the teams still have not figured out, have no idea how Bristol will race? And is this good or bad overall?
Well, Joe, I think that there are two relatively innocent parties in this formula because they don't dictate when practice time takes place. I think if we had taken this tire and ran it during the time of the race that we are going to run, we would obviously have a little bit more of a consistent and cohesive data set to work with. But unfortunately, we practiced and qualified before 5 p.m. on Friday. Sorry. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, if we're going to have one practice session all weekend long for any of the NASCAR series, they need to be run during the times of the race that they're going to be run. There is genuinely no sense to be made otherwise. Like, I get that, obviously there was an Xfinity Series race Friday night, and we have to be mindful of that. But at the same time, maybe run it, Wednesday night, Thursday night. Like, if you're trying to make sure that this tire and that these teams are as prepared for this tire as possible, then you have to, appropriate more practice time. And NASCAR just refuses to do that. So we got what we got, and granted, it was fantastic. Like, I'm not complaining about the quality of that race. It was absolutely bonkers. It was everything I begged for it to be on Friday night on Grid After Dark. But at the same time, I don't think that this exactly is a great way to determine who makes it out of the first round. So if we're going to have a nutso race like that, I'd really rather it be either the opening race of a round or the regular season finale or, something like that. I don't think this is a great closeout race, though it did provide a number of storylines throughout the event. But at the same time, like I said, I think the teams would have been a lot more prepared for this event had they had practice and qualifying at a time of day that would have reflected closer to what the race was going to be. And unfortunately, the sun was still shining on the racetrack when that happened, so we didn't end up getting that. All in all, though, I have no complaints about the event and how it went. It was incredible, beginning to finish, and I think that, if we can replicate this going forward somehow, we definitely should try to.
Yeah, just to mention, I agree a lot with what Tanner said too. And then when Joe ended his before the question about the bumper was being used, it was, and I think that's a really good thing. And I do one thing about the cars that I know a lot of us cars aren't our favorite thing, especially in the next gen era, but that they could take a hit like that. Like Brad Keselowski full on tried to send Christopher Bell into the wall, and it's almost like he squared up too perfectly coming to the finish, which caused Bell to not wreck. And also Bell's got a lot of talent too, so it could have some other drivers might have gone right into the wall, as we saw many times during this race. With 14 cautions, 137 laps. That was the 137 laps is the most amount of caution laps ever run in a cup race in the modern era, which is insane. That is 27.4% of this race was under caution. And it didn't seem like we were going to get that many cautions because it, like you said, I think the first however many laps were run under green, and then there were some minor cautions here or there, but then it just got chaotic with the tires, and then everyone stacking up new tires, old tires, and then rack, and then yeah, that's what happened there. But I think it proved that it's a good thing and a bad thing, Joe and Tanner. I think it's a good thing that it was chaotic and there were actually passing. There were more lead changes in the first 30 laps of this event or 40 laps of this event than the entire previous race here. So that's a good thing. Not for Kyle Larson though. Kyle Larson it was like he wasn't even in this event. He just only 5 points scored, his third worst Bristol finish in 19 career races here. Just completely not in the picture for someone who had usually come up front and dominated these races when there was no tire wear. So for that, it's good and bad because you saw a little chaos, you saw a lot of passes, but at the same time it was bad because of that same chaos too, especially like Tanner mentioned, this being a cutoff race. It works for television purposes and the chaos, but if you wanted to maybe move up the date to us, if this was the final playoff or final race before the playoffs, I think that would be very interesting too. But yeah, it was a very fun race. I really love the tire wear, and it was interesting to see guys like at the earlier run, like guys like Logano and Cindric seem to be doing a lot better. And then same like Ryan Blaney, another big one, can save his tires anywhere, and it showed a lot at the start. And then towards the end, you had guys like Logano who didn't have a set of tires left with 110 laps to go, had to put on scuffs, only right side tires. So you saw a lot of strategy play out, and I think the long green flag run was awesome. I wish there were more because I think it would have really had a surprise winner. And then you saw a lot of mistakes too because of these runs. Like Ty Gibbs had a big mistake. He was belt to butt a lot of this race, 201 laps led, and then comes down, gets hit, misses pit road, and then his tire goes down, then he finishes 10th. So good idea, bad idea. I don't know where NASCAR goes from here because I think they might want to overcorrect something like they usually do, and then we're going to have a Bristol spring race again that is the same exact thing as what we saw Kyle Larson leave 411 laps in. And then we might go to the night race again next season and then chaos again. So we'll see.
Overall, this race, I felt it was almost at a nice balance because we didn't have a caution really for someone blowing the tire. It was the aggression, it was the racing that I think a lot of people anticipate from Bristol. Still a bit different, but I really like is as people are trying to save their tires, some are going faster. You got too wide action on the tracks, not everyone single file. The mistakes, it's just part of the race. I mean, the Chase Elliott, John Hunter Nemechek incident comes to mind where he did not anticipate John Hunter Nemechek closing back quickly on him. I felt this was really overall a great race. I don't think Goodyear has it figured out. Maybe they'll be closing in because it seems like really it's depend on the temperatures. That seems to be the big thing. At the end of the day, I think it's good. What we saw, it wasn't as crazy as the first time we saw the crazy tire wear, where for Goodyear, as a business standpoint, they don't want their tires to be seen as a joke. I know there's already a lot of people that have opinions about that, but overall, I thought it was one that it would help promote that. Look, when Bristol puts on good races, there was a reason why back in the day there was a long wait list to get a ticket here. It'll be great to see it get to that point. Don't know how soon that'll be, but if we could just have sellouts again and less of those banners across the track, more seats available and true sellouts, that'll be great for Bristol. Bristol, as you have mentioned, Tanner Matthew, of course, this was the last race for the round of 16. So we knew 4 drivers were going to be out of the playoffs, but 3 were really knocked out early, and we thought weren't going to have much of an effort. Austin Dillon, issues, not in contention. Shane Van Gisbergen had a spin. Really,
spins, didn't he?
Several, yeah. I mean, we just was like, okay, this is not going to be his night. Josh Berry, a fire forced him out. Poor guy has finished last place 3 races in a row. You cannot have overs start to the playoffs in this. And Alex Bowman was really the only driver who had a shot at winning and potentially play spoiler, but came up short. Considering the drama we had on the track, sort of the lack of the drama, particularly when you had drivers that were just struggling and did not have a shot at advancing. With what you both said, if we had the Bristol night race become the regular season finale race, the cutoff race before the playoffs, and somehow knew you would get this product of you got to take care of your tires. You got to race hard because a mistake and you could be in it. And this is a track where you could really give the bumper, try the bumper run compared to Daytona. Would this be a better regular season ending race than Daytona?
I don't see why not. I think a lot of the chaos, though, was really, like Joe, you had mentioned, the guys kept trying to close the gap, and that's what happened when Chase Elliott got sent. That's what happened when Shane Van Gisbergen got sent, when Ty Gibbs moved Chris Buescher up the track. It was all because a lot of the guys saw that opening gap, and like Art and Senna said, you're not a driver if you don't take that gap. And all the drivers tried to take the gap, and it got shut really quickly, but not at the right time, and that's why there was so much chaos and that. But could you imagine, though, like Daytona's different because I feel like anyone can win there. I truly believe if there's 39 entries in the race, 39 can be victorious. Bristol, on the other hand, I would say it's a lot less than that. But could you imagine if you look at the results, right? Brad Keselowski, Zane Smith, those guys were second and third. Brad Keselowski has not won in over a year since Darlington. Zane Smith still does not have a Cup Series victory. Now, could you imagine how much harder Brad Keselowski would have sent into Christopher Bell? I don't know if they would have pulled the Austin Dillon and Richmond thing from the previous season, if they would have penalized Keselowski for it. But imagine Zane Smith, too. And then guys like Carson Hocevar were up front a lot of the day, too. Like, I think that would have been more interesting than seeing someone like, no offense to Cole Custer, almost making it in the playoffs of being like 34th or 33rd in points. But someone like that who can contend on speed, like Zane Smith's not had a good season. Front row in general is just not good this year. So, I mean, nothing against him. But Brad Keselowski, the RFK Fords are, if you look at the best of the rest, they're like 3 of the next 4. I think Buescher has a significant lead on Preece, and then Ty Gibbs is there, and then Brad Keselowski is actually next in points. So he's gotten around Kyle Busch in the regular season standing. So that would have been very interesting to see one of those RFK Racing guys like Brad Keselowski make it in with all this chaos, and it shows a veteran knowing how to save his tires, or maybe the Zane Smith, the young gun, trying to get it done as well. Or Ty Gibbs even had a great race up until a couple errors. Like those guys racing at the end. I think, hate to say it, but Daytona brings that chaos to where anyone can win. But I think what Bristol does is it brings that chaos, but not like the fringe playoff guys, like the Hosevars, like the Ty Gibbs, like the Brad Keselowskis. They all performed really well. So I don't see why not. But then again, with ratings, would you rather have, where are you going to, if I know people want Daytona a lot earlier, Mother Nature doesn't. Mother Nature doesn't like Daytona regardless in the summer. But it's just really interesting where you would put Daytona if you did move it. Like, do you put it the second to last race like they had with Darlington? Was that last season or 2 seasons ago where Darlington was last year?
Olympics.
Gotcha. Oh, so hey, the Winter Olympics are coming, so obviously that doesn't say anything. So maybe by 2028? Maybe they can figure something out there. But yeah, that's how I think. And then just to mention the playoff guys, Josh Berry having the worst playoff runs to start since Eric Jones in 2019, finishing 35th or worse in every race. That is very disappointing. It's almost like the Wood brothers. They get the one lucky race these past couple seasons where they get in victory lane and then they just completely fall apart. So my real thing now is with the points between SVG and Josh Berry is who finishes 16th in the regular season standings. Or the full season standings, because you know how when they make the playoffs they can't fall back any farther than 16. So I wonder if Berry or SVG or even Austin Dillon, which one of those three is going to be last of the playoff cars. But my cat is like harassing me. That's why if you hear noise in the background, so I'll let Tanner take over.
I think it's a little bit uncharitable to say that Wood Brothers like completely threw away the round. I do think that Darlington was absolutely their fault because obviously they set the tire pressures way too low, set the ride height way too low. So as Barry said, he bottomed out like 4 or 5 times through turn 1. And then finally that 6th time, obviously shot him up the racetrack into Tyler Reddick's side at the Southern 500 on lap 1 and completely ended his event before it even got going. Obviously at Gateway, that clearly wasn't Barry's fault. Chase Elliott, I wouldn't say he took him out, but he got loose and, got into him and ended the 21's race, putting him in a must-win yesterday. And I think something that the broadcast failed to note was that the only cars that were having those rocker panel issues where they were catching fire, you think of Chad Fincham, I believe, was in the 66. You had Cindric, Barry, and Blaney obviously had a pit stop where his wheel was practically on fire, but he kept going and it didn't matter. So, I do think for the Ford folks, looking at that rocker panel opening might be something to take a peek into going forward, because if everybody remembers back at the 22 Southern 500, obviously a Ford was the one that exposed this issue to begin with Kevin Harvick spontaneously combusting. But Kevin Harvick is actually the person I want to touch on next, because he made a very interesting comment coming into the week talking about how much he hates Saturday night racing. First of all, I vehemently disagree. I love Saturday night racing, even when I can't catch it live like last night. I think that it is stock car racing, like heritage to race on a Saturday night. And I think if we can still continue to do that when the circumstances provide for it, I think we should absolutely do it. With that soapbox moment out of the way, just talking about what I kind of touched on in our previous question, I think that if we can get a definitive formula to figure out exactly how last night and last April happened, then by all means move it to the regular season finale, because we'll have a tire race. And I can't speak for everybody, but what I saw last night was phenomenal, and I would love to see it every week, potentially. Obviously not at like Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta, but tire management should be a pivotal part of stock car racing or any racing series. If we're just racing on a bunch of rocks out there, then we're probably just going to have a line of stern race and an effective parade like we did the last 2 races here at Bristol. With that said, it seems that this tire and all of it kind of reacts better to a colder temperature. So unfortunately, I do worry that if we don't keep this race in the same spot and we move it back 3 weeks, will we still get that same temperature? I mentioned that on Friday night's broadcast, that if you move it back, you do have to worry about the possibility of tire management even becoming part of the conversation. Obviously, if Marcus Smith ends up putting a dome on Bristol at some point, maybe he can temperature control the arena, so stuff like that won't play as much of a factor, and you can just always have these kind of tire management races. But what we saw last night was more compelling, more fascinating, just plumb more entertaining than anything you see at Daytona, Talladega, or Atlanta. And frankly, it would be, I'd say a perfect conclusion to the NASCAR calendar for the regular season to end at Bristol with a race like this, rather than the typical S show that we normally get at Daytona for the regular season finale.
I would agree. I feel with Daytona, there's so much of a wild card aspect where, last year, Harrison Burton gets the win. It could be anybody getting the win, but then doesn't really add value to the playoffs when they're eliminated in that first round. With Bristol, if we could get something where we saw tire management is a premium, that means you have a driver like what we saw last night, Ty Gibbs, winless, having a good night run. You could try to use strategy. Zane Smith, 3rd place finish, going up there for the win. They didn't just luck in. Carson Hocevar. So many of these drivers that are good, and they could do this on a track where it's not just follow the leader, stay in the pack, and survive. Yeah, there's still that survival element. And here, that survival element could be a bump from a Brad Keselowski hungry for a win. Joey Logano just wanting to get more wins and playoff points. I think this could be a great regular season finale. But as you both said, what's going to happen with the switch 3 weeks back? And now we're talking about tires maybe not being an issue. Could we have it where I thought this was going to be something where we've seen in the past that high groove would just be the dominant groove and nobody's touching that bottom. But we were both wrong on that, and it would turn out to be a really just a fascinating show. And I just thought it was something that if we could get this as the regular season, it'll produce a better race. Daytona, I almost lean towards putting it back at 4th of July, but weather there, you just never know. In the chat room, Nicholas, thank you for joining us. Christopher Bell winning it wasn't exactly the Dinoco 400, it was 500. At Bristol, I just hate to see Brad Keselowski was so close. It was just an awesome race. It was fun. 100%. The 500-mile race was a lot of fun. Christopher Bell back in victory lane after his 3-race winning streak that snapped back in March at Las Vegas. Toyota, Joe Gibbs Racing, they have swept this round of 16 with Chase Briscoe again that win the Southern 500, Denny Hamlin, Enjoy Illinois 300, and now Christopher Bell, the Bass Pro Shop night race at Bristol, win 500 laps. Overall, I thought this was a really phenomenal display of what they're doing. And you can't count out that fact that Chase Briscoe, Ty Gibbs both led a bunch of laps. Briscoe came home in 9th place, and when you look at the round of 16, his 2nd place at Gateway and 1st at the Darlington, what a start he is having to the playoffs. A strong round of 16. I gotta ask you, Tanner, Can Joe Gibbs Racing and Briscoe, especially, dominate this next round, which consists of Loudon, New Hampshire, where they'll be trying to get the lobster, Kansas Speedway, very notorious track, I feel, and probably the most biggest wildcard of this round, the Charlotte Roval.
So I think that it's entirely possible, especially the 20 team. Obviously, Christopher Bell went on a magnificent run there of several consecutive poles at Kansas Speedway, and obviously finished second there in the spring race this year to Kyle Larson with Ryan Blaney, both hot on their heels. Not only that, Loudon has routinely been a really strong track for the likes of Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. prior to his retirement. So even though James Small and Martin Truex Jr. clearly just couldn't get the most out of one another, it seems that at that one track they coalesced and made good races out of it typically. Obviously, last year's race notwithstanding, with all the rain and the rain racing that we did, which was really awesome. But at the same time, I can also see, especially for someone like Martin, who has done nothing but, put a tarp on his car if there's moisture in the area, I'm sure it threw him for a loop. Then you have the Roval where, obviously you've got someone like Christopher Bell that's won there before when he really needed to. So I think it's entirely possible we could see them have a really strong showing in the round of 12, but I also am starting to see the Penske cars start to rise up, and it's so funny. Everybody wanted to start dumping dirt on their grave as soon as we got out of Darlington because they didn't really put up a great showing. I think that was a little bit more circumstantial than anything. But I think that the Penske cars are still, ones to watch. I think Bubba Wallace is still putting on, great performances. I think last night I couldn't really tell what happened to the 23 car, but obviously he was involved in that final caution when Brad just completely wiped him out through John Hunter Nemechek, so which was a really interesting event. But yeah, I definitely think JGR has a really strong shot to have a strong showing through the next round, but I do think we're starting to see some other teams start to, rise up. Hendrick Motorsports, though, I think they're a little bit in trouble going into the next round. I really am a little bit concerned about how Chevy is going to get any of their cars out of this round based on the performances they showed us in the first round.
Yeah, on my end, I think what happened, there were so many incidents. I think what happened was, I think Bubba specifically was Brad and Cole Custer, I think, was it? Or was it? It was either Custer or John Nemechek came up the track, and that killed that Bubba's day. And Bubba seemed to be up in the top 5 most of it, too. But yeah, like Tanner had mentioned, too, like Penske, I think a lot of us counted them out, and then they clearly showed up when it mattered the most. So I know we're talking about Gibbs a lot, but Penske is definitely a team to watch, without a doubt. But yeah, with Gibbs and the next gen at these types of tracks going to Loudon, Kansas, and Roval, I truly would not doubt if Joe Gibbs wins 3 in a row again. Like if they win 6 total races in a row, I don't think it's going to happen. But Loudon, I feel like is Christopher Bell's cup of tea, and then Kansas could be anyone. If it's not Kyle Larson or even like a Chris Buescher. 2311's been good there, but Denny Hamlin's always good there. Briscoe's shown pace there. Even Ty Gibbs has shown pace there. And then you go to the Roval, which I think that could be Christopher Bell again getting it done. But at the same time, I feel like Ty Gibbs, that's his next best chance at a victory would be the Roval. But yeah, I think they can continue to come out and put pedal to the floor like they have been doing. Especially Toyota seems to have picked it up a lot. There have been years where it seems like they get 5-6 cars in the playoffs and then 3 are eliminated immediately. This year they got all to the next round with it'd be Reddick, Bubba, Bell, Hamlin, and Briscoe. So with 12 cars remaining and you have 5 of them, that's pretty good for Toyota. So maybe they could be the champions this year in the next gen era for the first time. They haven't won a championship in quite a while either. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, without a doubt, I think if Briscoe can keep it up, I'm not sure if he can. I didn't expect him to be this dominant, scoring the most points among all drivers in the playoffs so far. Didn't think that was going to happen, so shout out to him. But I think they could pick it up, especially now if Hamlin's getting hot at the right time, Bell's getting hot at the right time, Briscoe's getting hot at the right time. You never know what really could happen, but I think this next set of tracks with New Hampshire, with Kansas, and with the Roval definitely play in their favor. But like we thought with certain teams like Hendrick, they ended up only losing one car, but after the first couple races of the playoffs, we were like, oh, they're not doing as well as we thought. And same with Penske. I knew Joey Logano was going to be borderline heading in, as Cindric as well. I didn't think that Joey Logano was going to do that well at Bristol, so I have to eat crow on that. I want to apologize to Joey Logano. Had his best Bristol performance since I was a freshman in high school, so good for him. But yeah, I think we're in for another exciting round. I think it's not often do you have probably the 4 worst drivers in the regular season standings that made the playoffs get eliminated right away. So I think now we're in a field of 12 that all 12 of those guys really truly deserve to get into the playoffs, if that makes sense. I know we do the winning in and stuff like that with Austin Dillon, with Josh Berry being low. I know Shane Van Gisbergen had 4 victories, but still he was 24th, 23rd in the points before the playoffs. So, regular season, obviously, winning you're in completely changes that. But I think now we have a set of 12 drivers that all 12 of them truly deserve to be there. They were consistent all year. They won races besides Tyler Reddick didn't win anything. But all of them deserve to be there. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens here.
In the chat room, a couple of comments. First up from Nicholas. This was the one I already read about the Cars reference. I'm pretty sure Chase Briscoe and Christopher Bell are going to be dangerous for Kansas and New Hampshire and the Roval Charlotte. If I'm Hendrick and Trackhouse, I'm thinking like we better go and win. I know we talked about this. I believe it was either After Dark or the wrap-up show last week. The potential of Chevrolets, and this is what we saw. SVG, Austin Dillon, Alex Bowman are all out. So that means you look at the new playoff picture right now. Well, you got essentially Ross Chastain below the cut line. Chase Elliott. I mean, he is above the cut line going in, but it doesn't take much. And what has happened to Kyle Larson? It seems like after the Indianapolis 500, this is not the same Kyle Larson before the Indy 500. So it's like, yeah, Chevrolets, they may not be in a pretty spot. And you have Loudon, Christopher Bell win that. Let's just throw it out there. Kansas, Briscoe. And then a wild card in the Roval where Shane Van Gisbergen could win, but he's out of the playoffs. Oh my goodness. What a crazy set of circumstances could be for the Chevrolet and 4 teams, but at the same time, 2311 better step up their game a little bit. No mistakes. I know for Hendrick Motorsports, last night was disappointing. Mistakes. Kyle Larson having a poor night. Chase Elliott crashed out. He could have been eliminated potentially last night, especially if Bowman had gotten the win in. Who knows what would have that cost. Byron caught up in issues. Really, Bowman was the only one with a strong run all day, Matt. Do you believe potentially that Bowman really rose up that, okay, this is the playoffs and he stepped it up, did everything? Or did Chevrolet, Hendrick Motorsports put all essentially their eggs in the basket, put everything into trying to get Bowman to ensure all 4 cars would advance? And was it worth it if they did that?
Yeah, I think it was more Bowman rising up. I really don't think Chevrolet or Hendrick tried to put extra effort in. I think they knew Bowman not bad at Bristol at all. And I think he was the best chance of the 4 guys not in this, I guess, the best of the 3 Chevy guys under the cut line. to get it done. And really, Bowman had a great year. And like we have said multiple times, he gets really hot and really cold. And unfortunately for him, he got really hot at a time he didn't need to really get hot at. And then it all shut down right when he needed to get hot. So, I think he had the second, or I was reading it earlier, I believe like only the third or fourth worst playoff points of the 16 guys. Obviously, they started below the cut line, and if you don't score a lot of points, you're not going to go anywhere. But Bowman really showed up, and I think Hendrick, I don't know if Hendrick would have been as happy if Bowman got that victory and then knocked Chase Elliott out of the playoffs. I think that would have been not the best thing for their organization, but at the same time, after Cindric had those issues, he fell to 30th. He actually finished worse than Shane Van Gisbergen because he finished 26th. So Cindric finishing 30th, I think he would have been the odd man out, I believe, if Bowman did, in fact, win. So I think lucky for Cindric that Bowman ended up not finishing in the top 5. But if he did finish like second or third and Cindric, there were less cars that had crashed, and Cindric, instead of being 30th, was like 34th or 35th, so we'd be having a completely different conversation right now. So for Hendrick, too, they still got arguably your best 3 drivers into the next round, even though they didn't really show up at all. They were just had better regular seasons. Now, if you look at the reset, Byron and Larson are now 24 points again above the cut line. So that's all you need. And then Chase Elliott's only 5. So Chase Elliott is the one they're going to need to worry about come into this round. But Chase Elliott, again, I feel like he's been a little discouraged. He clearly didn't understand what was going on with the playoffs, nor do I think he cares. I think he just wants to go out there and race and try to advance. But, yeah, I think it was a bad round for Chevrolet to lose 3 of your drivers, but at the same time, it was quite expected considering those 3 drivers among the standings before the playoff reset were the worst of the 3 that made it in. Honestly, I think most of us, specifically me, I thought Chastain was going to be the odd one out. I honestly thought Bowman was going to make up the points, but shout out to Ross Chastain. And the Trackhouse has not been great at all this season, besides the road courses and the Coke 600. But for Chastain to really point his way into the next round, I give him a shout out. But again, we'll see. Hendrick could completely flip the switch and win the next 3. We don't know what's going to happen. Kyle Larson is a little tired, I think. It's not going to happen, Tanner. But I'm saying you never know with that. But I think Kyle Larson, too, is a little worn out. I think him racing a lot in 2020 when he was suspended to when he was winning a lot and it got him back into it. Then he came and kicked butt in 2021. But now I think he's racing so much that I don't know if is it helping him to not take a couple of days off. But again, I'm not one of the best drivers in the world. I'm just a kid sitting in his bedroom right now, so I can't comment on Kyle Larson right now.
So I don't think that Chevrolet and Hendrick did anything different to Bowman's car. I just think that Blake Harris and Alex Bowman executed a great race. Their pit crew, not so much, but you got to give Mr. H and Chevy credit. They tried shifting over the 77's pit crew, and interestingly enough, Bowman's old pit crew with the 77 had great stops all night, and Bowman did not with the 77 crew that was allegedly faster and better. So that's interesting in itself. Would it have been worth it? Yes. Getting 4 of your cars, getting them extra money every year for the next 3 years, yes, that's always worth it. And, giving you a 1 out of 3 shot to win the title because you have 4 of the 12 title contenders remaining, yes, absolutely, it's worth it to, give as much resources as you can to try to, make that happen. With that said, I think Bowman did really rise up. I mean, this is one of his stronger tracks. If you go back to that 2024 April race, or I guess it was March, actually, but if you go back to the Bristol spring race from 2024, where we had a similar race to this, Alex Bowman was one of the few cars still on the lead lap, so tire management is something that's in his vocabulary. And obviously he and Blake Harris do know how to set up a car for it. So with that in mind, I'm not tremendously surprised at their performance last night and how well they did, especially compared to their teammates. Chase Elliott was having a good night and is known for being able to manage his equipment well. I believe he was one of the few cars that was only one lap down last year, or maybe he was also on the lead lap. I can't exactly recall. But, obviously at these kinds of races, it kind of leans into his skill set a little bit more. Kyle Larson and William Byron know nothing about tire management at this point in their big careers. And you got to wonder if it's ever going to happen. And I think that's part of why Larson probably ended up having trouble last night, outside of just sustaining some general damage due to, the chaotic nature of the race. But if Kyle Larson could just learn how to go 70% in a race car, I think it would benefit him a lot. I think that, him always going 100%, similar to Ross Chastain, it's a recipe for disaster in a race like this. And clearly we saw as much. The 24 team, they're coming apart at the seams at the worst possible time. I'm kind of concerned about them going into this round. I think that Loudon will be a very bad race for them, and that could put them close to the cut line. And if something crazy happens at Kansas, like it usually does in the spring race to them, they might be fighting for their lives at the Roval to make it to the next round. And obviously, as we know at the Roval, anything's possible. So, I mean, not to be an alarmist or anything, but there is a non-zero chance that Hendrick Motorsports doesn't advance to the round of 8 with any of their 3 remaining cars. I don't think you'll hear that talked about as a consideration, but these tracks don't really shape up well for them this time of year. And with the way Toyota's just been blowing the doors off everybody and Ford's been right in their tire tracks, you got to wonder about Chevy at this point of the year. And if you all remember, back in our preseason predictions, I said the Hendrick Motorsports would win at most 8 wins this year. We are almost 30 races in. They have won 6. On top of that, I also just feel that Chevy, because they are in the 4th year of this very model of car with this exact model of Camaro, I just feel like it was natural that they were going to have a backslide. Now, obviously, they had Shane Van Gisbergen kind of cover that up at the road courses, getting 4 wins there, and Ross Chastain and Austin Dillon picking up wins for some of the lesser Chevy teams. But Hendrick Motorsports has not really been the powerhouse that we've known them to be most of this year. They had a brief spurt there before the double attempt with Kyle Larson where obviously they popped off a ton of wins. They had Byron's 500 and Larson's 3 wins in quick succession, and they've largely fallen off the map since. So I really wouldn't be surprised to see Hendrick have a very challenging round of 12, and I think the only one I'm really confident is probably going to make it is Kyle Larson and Cliff Daniels, because they're really the only one of those 3 that I think has, the wherewithal to make it no matter what.
This is going to be something where I feel with what we have been seeing from the Toyotas, they are one to watch. In the chat room, we got some more comments, and we thank everyone for their comments. Denver, since the double disappointment, Kyle Larson has been off. I seen to me that what had happened at Indy 500, Cook 600 double, I feel like it damaged his reputation and his mind. Very interesting aspects thinking about that. Denver also says, given he was expected to complete the double, and, well, we know how that went. And then, if SVG is the favorite at the Roval, who finishes second to advance to the round of 8? Oh, man.
Might be Chase Elliott. I mean, has a defined history of success there, but hasn't in the next-gen car. So, Tyler Reddick if he doesn't go airborne like he did last year. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, AJ Allmendinger obviously has a solid reputation there, and he also, put on a clinic in qualifying this past week. But unfortunately, he was probably the first guy to find out last night that the track is a cheese grater. Man.
You, Matt, you got a thought?
I think a Roval, probably a guy like Elliott, probably. I mean, Larson hasn't been bad at road courses either. It's funny with Elliott that he was obviously like the next coming savior when it came to winning road courses, and then the next gen's kind of nipped that. But at the same time, he still has like the second or third lowest average finish in the next gen era on road courses. He just doesn't have a victory. So I think that could be possible that he could bring it to SVG. It just really depends on what they do that Friday and that Saturday prior to the race on Sunday, and then even during the race on Sunday. But then a guy who could play Tyler Reddick needs a good performance. He's not starting above the cut line. And then William Byron's really like another Chevy guy, not bad on road courses. I don't think Ross Chastain's a bad road course racer either. So one of them possibly could try to get into the round of 8 by having a type of performance like that. I don't really think anyone Christopher Bell I think would be a favorite for second, but I think he'll already have way more than enough points going into that event. So we'll see what happens. But that's a good point. If SVG does win, who finishes second?
Yeah, and every single point will matter if he wins second place, obviously the most points, but if you get those stage points, which might be SVG, but depending on strategy, you could maybe get those stage wins. The fastest lap. If I was the teams, I would be trying to maximize as many points as you can in Kansas and Loudon, just because Roval could be pretty unpredictable and could come down to points if you have an SVG victory. Of course, the Roval after that will be the round of 8, but the Roval, the final race in the round of 12. Hamlin leads Byron, Larson, and Bell. The top 4, 20-plus points above the cut line. Blaney, Briscoe, Elliott, and Walls are the bottom 4 above the cut line, but with Walls only ahead of Austin Cindric in 9th by 1 point. So single digits once we get to below the cut line with Cindric, Logano, Chastain, and Reddick. So we're talking positions on the track that could put Reddick from below the cut line to above the cut line. A mistake by one of the drivers up front, a poor race. I mean, 20 points, that's 2 stage wins. If you have Reddick going out there and getting even a second place in both stages in the Loudon race, that's still a gain of 18 points. So I know we shared our predictions online about the 4 that we thought would be eliminated this round. Tanner, starting with you, what 4 drivers do you anticipate will be most likely eliminated from the round of 12?
I really should have taken more time to think about this, but I am going to go off of my gut. Joey Logano will be the first one out. I just don't think any of these tracks really suit him or traditional Penske speed. Ross Chastain probably as well. I just don't think that team has shown race winning pace, and they're not getting stage points. So I think that they're probably just going to find themselves on the margins more or less and end up falling out. I think Austin Cindric probably gets bounced, and maybe even Tyler Reddick. But Tyler Reddick has been strong at each of the 3 tracks in this round, so I don't think it's going to be him. Cindric showed flashes of pace at both the Roval and at Kansas last year. Just wasn't able to get it done, unfortunately. Loudon has similar properties to Phoenix and Gateway, 2 tracks that Cindric has had success at in the past, so I don't think it'll be him. I think the 2 other drivers are going to be William Byron and Chase Elliott. They just have not been strong this year, and I think that Kyle Larson will be Chevy's last hope going into the round of 8. And Going to be tough sledding ahead for the 5 team if that's the case.
Have to think for a second. That's good. I don't know if you guys, I'm a little laggy on my end. If you guys can hear me or see me, let me know.
We can hear you, and you are just frozen on the screen at the moment, but we can hear you.
That's not an appalling. Okay. What an appalling photo that is, guys! Holy heck! But if you want, for me, hopefully I come back. If you can still hear me, then I'll keep talking. But just interrupt me if you can't. For me, Tanner and I both had 3 of the 4 right heading in. So my playoff bracket, I have there I am, kind of. I hate Google Chrome with a passion, by the way, but I have guys right. I had Bowman in instead of Chastain. So my playoff, I would say, if I keep it consistent with who I had, I think Logano gets bounced out. I think Cindric gets bounced out. I think Chastain gets bounced out. And I would lean. It's interesting because guys like Bubba have 2 top 10s at the Rovals, and he's better at New Hampshire and he's good at Kansas. So it's like I think he'll do well. Chase Elliott too has been pretty decent at those 3 tracks in the next year, so I probably would keep him in. William Byron actually has done really well, average finish wise, at these 3 tracks as well, especially the Roval. Oh, it's so nice to see my ugly face moving. So that's good. Just messing around. There is one driver who I had eliminated early, or as in the round of 12, who I truly don't think it now, but I'm going to say this driver, and it is going to come as a shock to you guys who I had getting eliminated in the round of 12, and it's just by their performance. They have not been good at all at the Roval in the next gen era. Kansas has not been a strong suit for them either, and Loudon they've been pretty good at. So if they have a good point, say there. And a lot of it's a product of their equipment they've been in. But Chase Briscoe, I think, would be, if he has a bad couple races, that 10 points to the cut line, despite how good he did in the first round, 10 points goes away very, very easily, especially for someone like him who starts up front all the time. If he doesn't start, if he has a bad starting spot like he did at Bristol, where he was like 31st or 32nd, and doesn't make up that momentum at a Kansas, at New Hampshire, where it's harder to pass, Roval, anything could happen. So I guess I would put Logano, Cindric, Chastain, and then my borderline would be between probably like Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick, Bubba, and Briscoe. But just for the, I guess, S-word and gigs, I'm just going to say Chase Briscoe will be a surprise elimination. And I hope I'm wrong just for the sake of it. But if I'm just keeping it consistent with what I said 4 weeks ago, that I had Briscoe out. I didn't think he was going to turn Super Saiyan or whatever it's called and lock in. I didn't know that. But you never know. Fires get put out very quickly when they get water on them. So
unless you're the Wood Brothers. But yes.
Yeah, clearly that was terrible.
I was going to say, if you have a 4, the Wood Brothers, Austin Cindric, if you get on fire, it takes a while to get that fires out. So, in the chat room, Denver, I'm assuming the 4 to be eliminated. Ooh. Kyle Larson, Joey Logano, Ross Chastain, Austin Cindric. Oh, man.
You never know.
You never know. Like you said, I mean, 20 points over 3 races is not that much. I think if I had to go, I would go Chase Elliott, I think, will be eliminated. Ross Chastain, Logano. Oh, maybe Austin Cindric. But that just seems too perfect that it's 2 Chevys, 2 Fords. But that might be the way it goes unless 2311 just does not have a good start to the round and struggle throughout. But it's going to be a lot of fun to see what happens. Of course, we'll be talking more about Loudon, New Hampshire, the Lobster. Everyone's going to be trying to win that. We'll see what happens. And of course, we'll be following that right here on the Grid Network, gridnetworktv.com, and across social media. With that said, we're going to be switching over to the Supercar series. But before we do that, we'll let you go, Matthew. What is your one shiny moment?
It's tough. Hopefully for this, and it's not my internet. It's specifically the application Chrome. That's why I am a hater right now. So I apologize for my lagginess on my end, but it's I think for the third week in a row, it's probably my one shining moment from NASCAR specifically is just Toyota again being able. Now they have 201 Cup wins. Bell showed up. Ty Gibbs had a great performance. Joe Gibbs led 341 laps, not including Bell's 12 laps left or 20 something laps left. So they did pretty well again. And then Bubba was up front as well. So I would say Toyota is my one shining moment for there. And then when you're going to touch on supercars, I think Kostecki again, just being able to do what he does best. Especially, it's been a struggle for him moving over to Ford, but I think he's been picked it up a little bit. Obviously, a couple wins now. MotoGP. I mean, there's a new record I know you guys are going to be talking about with points in a season, so I think that's definitely a one shining moment for Mr. Marc Marquez as well. So I will let you guys go. Thank you guys for having me. Hopefully people stay tuned in, enjoy the rest of the show. We got a lot more to talk about. But for me, I will be heading out, and so was my internet connection, it seems like. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Matthew. We'll see you next time when we're on the air. We'll go ahead and bring in Kobe in because I know, Kobe, you were up quite late in the East Coast for the Supercar Series. Tanner, can you get us started with our Supercar Series coverage?
Absolutely, Joe. The Supercars series ended up going to the Bend Motorsport Park, hosting the Repco Supercars Championship for the first endurance race prior to the Bathurst 1000. Jamie Whincup started the race for Triple Eight and led the opening portion of the race until a refueling issue took the 88 out of contention. Overall, no caution flags, no safety cars to speak of, and for the most part, a relatively uneventful race. There are still, some mistakes that took place on track, and the Bend has plenty of runoff room, unlike Mount Panorama. At the end, a big points day, 300 points for Brody Kostecki and Todd Hazelwood, the co-driver, taking the win. Kobe, starting with you, entering the Bathurst 1000, where do Kostecki and Hazelwood stack up among the competition?
Well, it was an interesting move over the offseason when Brody Kostecki decided to leave Airbus Motorsport and go over to Dick Johnson Racing. We're wondering how this partnership was going to go after they moved on from Anton De Pasquale, and it was a huge eye raiser when they announced that Todd Hazelwood was coming over. His co-driver he found a lot of success with last year at Airbus, and I thought that the Kostecki Hazelwood pairing was extremely strong and overall, I thought they just had a lot of chemistry last year at Airbus, and for them going over to Dick Johnson Racing, I wondered, would the same good teamwork and chemistry carry over to a new team, new manufacturer? And after this Air Touch 500 at the Bend Endurance Race, I can definitely say with a lot of confidence that everything we saw last year at Airbus with these two appears to have transferred over, and that's a good sign of things to come for the great race, which is next on the schedule. I thought Kostecki and Hazelwood, executed the best way that they could all throughout the race. Had nothing go wrong, and they had the pace. I know there at the end, Cam Waters made things really interesting with Brody Kostecki, but Brody was able, to manage his tires, and then towards the end, he ended up pulling away for Cam because Waters had nothing for him. Yeah, I know for most of these weekends we see Chevrolet been the favorite, but on this weekend at the Bend, it was the Ford teams who were the ultimate favorites, and got to tip your hat to Brody and Todd for a job well done.
Brody and Todd, they are looking really good for the Bathurst 1000. I mean, this teaming of the two of them, again, because last year they were looking great, I got to say they have to be one of the favorites for the Bathurst 1000, which is really surprising because all year we've been talking about Triple Eight Racing, Brock Feeney. Looks like he's on path to get his first Repco Supercar Series championship. And then here comes the Bend. Really, this race is more about let's get everything in place for Bathurst 1000. And sure enough, that's where Brody Kostecki, that's where Todd Hazelwood seem to show up, and they're getting it done. I think they got to feel pretty good about their chances for the great race. And overall, it'll be interesting to see how this is all going to shake up as we lead into Bathurst.
Indeed, it will. Yeah, I think that Kostecki and Hazelwood put on a spirited effort throughout that event and definitely look to be one of the favorites heading into the great race. Obviously, they won the Bathurst 1000 last year in a Chevy Camaro for Erebus. Now they are in a Ford with Dick Johnson Racing, seeking their first win in the great race since 2019 when Scotty Mack took the Bathurst 1000 with DJR Team Penske. Last year, though, there was only one car that DNF'd from Bathurst in a rather tame race, but we've seen how wild that race can be with multiple cautions and plenty of surprises. So, Joe, kicking it to you, was the bend an indicator of how the Bathurst 1000 may play out?
It's hard to tell just because we know there's been discussion about this car, the quality of the race product. We could still see a crazy race at Bathurst. It just seems like every few years you're going to get that crazy race. We had 1 year, it looked like it was going to be a tamed race into an echidna, Australian animal, looked like a porcupine, got on the track, brought out the safety car, got off the track, but then the chaos occurred with caution after caution after caution. I would say overall, it may indicate that you're going to have to put a big qualifying effort because you want to be up towards the front. Have that great start because those pit stops are going to be much longer. With that said, Bathurst, I think, has some of the best qualifying as you're trying to go so fast through that Mount Panorama circuit. All the talk about trying to beat the lap of the gods. We've seen the clips of the fast times there set by like Scott McLaughlin, some of the best in Supercar series. I think overall it can't be a real indicator for the race just because I feel it's just such a different race, the Bathurst 1000 compared to the Bend.
Yeah, Joe. And one of the biggest things that I saw at the Bend was the problems with execution, all throughout the weekend. And I'm really happy we have this endurance race before the main one, Bathurst 1000, because this is the first time all year these co-drivers, get to be in these supercars outside of a test session. To be able to, get used to the handling the car, get used to the feel, and just overall get up to speed with the race procedures. I know a lot of these guys, they're racing in other series throughout the year. Some of them racing Trans Am, some in the Porsche Carrera Cup Australia series, and some of these drivers, this is the only time of the year that they're racing absolutely anything. So this is a good tune-up for what's to come at the great race. And speaking of execution, though, and the big things I saw was, AAA, Red Bull Ampel Racing completely fell on their face this entire race weekend. And one of the biggest surprises to me was in Jamie Whincup, one of the greatest supercars drivers of all time. He had, one of his lowest of lows that we've ever seen from him in supercars. And it started in practice when they had the slow zone. Yeah, they were practicing the new slow zone procedures that I first brought to you, talked about on Grit tonight on Wednesday, because a couple of the races this year have ended behind the safety car, and Supercars wants to ensure that we get as much racing as possible, and don't, I guess, so-called waste laps behind the safety car. So similar to what we see in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, they decided to introduce the slow zones this weekend. But as you mentioned, Tanner, no caution, so we didn't really need a slow zone, so we didn't really get to see what that would look like during a race condition. With the Circuit de la Sarthe at Le Mans, that track is so big, that makes the slow zones work perfectly. But the Bend, obviously not big like Le Mans. It will be interesting to see how this procedure will work at a smaller road course compared to that big monster at Le Mans. Where you had the Mulsanne straight where you can be on the opposite side of you could be on the opposite side of the track, going through the Porsche curves. You could be at full speed. Then on the Mulsanne straight, you're in the slow zones and all of that. So that was unfortunate. We didn't get to see what that looked like in supercars. But to get back to the main gist of the story, in practice, they were practicing this slow zone procedure, right? And Scott Pye, who was, in the car that was being shared with Will Brown, Scott Pye did the right thing. As soon as the slow zone, light come on, he slowed down. Jamie Whincup, asleep at the wheel, ran into the back of Scott Pye, tore up both of their cars. And that's a mistake you don't really see from Jamie Whincup. Then obviously, the race came around. And this was not Jamie's fault, but it was just a unfortunate error that happened in the pits. They didn't get the fuel tank full in a supercar for this race. You can fill up to 121 liters of fuel. Guess how much fuel they got in that stop? Only 18 liters. So that's basically only a few laps of fuel, and then they had to come back in, and that basically ruined the rest of their race when they had to come back in for an unscheduled stop to refill. So yeah, so basically, Red Bull Ampol Racing, Triple Eight, to see them make a mistake like that is, unprecedented, because this is a team that's, we're used to seeing perfection from them in every aspect of the race, and for them to, drop the ball like that with the most dominant car of the season in that number 88, really shocking. And for their sake, hopefully they got this mulligan out of the way before Bathurst, because, Brock Feeney, he's been on it all year. And it was, real disappointing to see them down in 19th position, which is, really shocking to see for this organization. And then Will Brown, Scott Pye, they're basically nowhere all weekend, and they just did not have the pace at all to contend. And I think Will Brown's been facing a championship hangover from last year, because he hasn't, had the same, pace or luck than he had last year, because, Brock Feeney's been really, dominating him in the teammate battle all year. And one last thing on Jamie Whincup. I know he's getting older now, obviously not the same Jamie Whincup he used to be. I do wonder, after, a weekend where he, made a whole bunch of mistakes, not just, when he made that silly air crash in the back of Scott Pye in the race, he was making mistakes. He was overdriving corners, went off track. He's still, quick, has a lot of speed, hasn't lost, a ton of that. But, just from an execution standpoint, Jamie did not have his, greatest race, and Brock Feeney ended up taking up for him, saying that it was the field issue that ruined our race, that, whatever happened with Jamie after that, just not really important, because the race was killed, when we put 18 liters of fuel in there instead of 121. So one of the biggest things I'm taking away from the Bathurst 1000, not from the Bathurst, I meant from the Bend before the Bathurst 1000, is that these teams still have a lot to work on between now and then, in terms of execution.
Yeah, indeed. We do have some comments here in the chat room. Denver says the Bend 500, it was a meh race, but it was interesting to see how Supercars tried to emulate the Bathurst 1000 by having the precursor Enduro at the Bend, which is a good choice of track to do it at, followed by the way, at the Bend, you can go off the road to Timbuktu and still not cause a safety car situation. Yeah, no kidding. With all that said, yeah, I feel like this race was a true testament to the, concept of endurance racing. It seemed that all the drivers that you expected to have strong runs just didn't have the endurance, essentially, to, make it through their problems and execute at the right times. And ultimately, it fell right into the hands of Dick Johnson Racing, Brody Kostecki, and Hazelwood there. So moving on to our next section, Joe, tell us a little bit about, or Kobe, I'm sorry, tell us a little bit about the San Marino Grand Prix with MotoGP.
Yeah, in the San Marino Grand Prix at Misano, once again, actually we saw Marquez fall short of another weekend sweep. Marquez did win the Grand Prix earlier today, but crashed that well lead in the sprint race on Saturday. This handed Marco Bezzecchi the sprint race win, and the first non-Marquez rider to win a sprint this year. And with that said, the Riders' Championship is nearly wrapped up. Mark leads his brother Alex by 182 points and only needs to leave Japan with more than 185 points to clinch the MotoGP title. Joe, do you think Alex Marquez can outscore his brother by 3 points in Japan, or is it over for him?
It is over for him. There's 3 points. I mean, Marc Marquez finishes on the podium ahead of Alex Marquez. It's over. The only way it won't happen is if we're talking way back where we're getting into the single-digit points. Because remember, the top 15 riders score points in the Grand Prix. At the end of the day, Marc Marquez has this. I mean, he could pretty much have his one hand on the trophy and the other hand just about to grasp that trophy. Well, in this case, it's MotoGP, which they just redesigned their trophy, which personally I'm not a big fan of, but I get it. The new rebranding effort of MotoGP, they wanted a trophy to sort of match that branding effort. Curious to hear in the comments what people think of the new MotoGP trophy design. But for Marc Marquez, he just needs to go out there, do what he needs to do. I mean, even if he has a sprint race where he crashes out and Alex finishes ahead, the sprint races are not that many points. So then the Grand Prix, Marc Marquez could go out there, dominate. The competition is much more fierce behind him. I mean, we saw what Marco Kostecki was been able to do. The fact that he's been performing well, racing good against Marc Marquez's teammate Pecco Bagnaia. We've seen how Fabio Quartararo sometimes with a Yamaha has been able to get good races. This is not going to be a race, I think, in Japan for Alex Marquez to go out there and have a strong run and keep his championship hopes alive. I think, Kobe, at the end of the day, we're going to be talking about Marc Marquez, your 2025 world champion at Japan, and we still have 5 races remaining after Japan.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. And with the championship, wrapped up so early, I wonder if MotoGP, like some other series, are they going to reevaluate the championship format? We know for many years, Supercars, had a traditional season-long championship format, and the Bathurst 1000 that we just talked about, it's not just, the Crown Jewel Endurance race in Australia. It's not just a great race, but it's also the regular season finale now, and also the finale of the Endurance Cup. And once Bathurst is over, we get into the very first year of the Supercars playoffs, which they call the finals. So with so many drivers, dominating the Supercars championship in recent years, we saw with Scott McLaughlin, so obviously, Shane Van Gisbergen as well. Supercars obviously felt like they needed to, shake things up a bit to keep people tuned in. So they installed a playoff format. And I'm not sure if that will happen with MotoGP, but I'm sure Liberty Media, who are now the new owners of the series, maybe they're not so pleased to see the championship get wrapped up so soon. But then again, Liberty also owned Formula One, and they haven't had a playoff format, so maybe they leave it as is. I guess we'll just have to wait and see there. But getting back to what we were talking about, Joe, I do think it's over for Alex Marquez. It's just a matter of time. Like, if Marc Marquez, let's say suffer an injury in practice or qualifying, and he's out the rest of the season, he's still going to win the championship. Like, he doesn't even have to make another start this year, and he will end up being the champion, because I do not have any confidence that Alex Marquez can make up this gap. It's just a foregone conclusion that Marc Marquez is going to win this year's MotoGP World Championship. And before we move on to the next thing, Joe, I wanted to ask you about someone you mentioned, Pecco Bagnaia, who is not having, the best year at all. It's amazing how this guy, he was, one of the standards in MotoGP in the last few years. And basically he's become the 2024 version of Sergio Perez, while Marc Marquez has become Max Verstappen. And I wanted to, talk to you about some comments I was reading this morning from Pecco. I think it was yesterday after the sprint race. Pecco was speaking to Sky Italy, and he said, "My patience is running out." Talking about his patience running out with Ducati. He said it's difficult. My effort is enormous. My head is strong. I will not lose confidence in my potential and in my team. We will continue to work, and one day we will return. I hope it will be soon. And then he said, "We'll have to work harder. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. We have to look at the data and understand what's going on." And say, someone has to explain to me. He said, "Because I'm living a nightmare." And then the team boss of the Ducati factory team, was asked about Pecco's comments, about saying that his patience is running out. And he responded and said, "My patience is running out with him too." Yeah, so that was some really strong words there from the Ducati factory team boss there. And Joe, what I want to ask you about this is, we saw, last few years, Pecco's been the number one rider over at Ducati. Marc Marquez has come in, and now Pecco, although he is, doing well in the championship, he's nowhere near the level of a Marc Marquez who's completely blowing his two wheels off. So do you think, do you see, Pecco Bagnaia recovering his form? Maybe not this year, but next year. Or do you think that this is going to get so bad where both sides are just going to end up, going their separate ways?
I gotta be honest, Kobe. After seeing that, it made me think like they might be going their separate ways. Because the big thing is this: with Pecco Bagnaia, I believe his contract is valid throughout the 2026 year. So he has one more year with Ducati. He's been with Ducati for quite a long time with Pramac. He was there with the Ducati team before he got the big opportunity with the factory team. And it was really with the factory team where I think a lot of people saw, I was like, okay, he went from a rider where he was with Pramac, Ducati, mid-pack, nothing sensational. Let's see what he could do. Okay, first year, 2021. Second place in the standings. One too many mistakes. That gave it to Fabio Quartararo. But then 2022, 2023, double world championship. I will have to say, great effort by him. 2024, what a year. 11 wins. First rider in history to get more than 10 wins and not the championship because of the sprints. And Jorge Martin just really stepped it up. Pecco Bagnaia is the defending grid ranking world champion. And I feel like the way he's performing this year, this does not seem that great at all. Granted, he's still third in the Riders' Championship. But his hope is to go out there and get a championship. He is so far behind Marc Marquez. He's already eliminated from the championship. And when you have a caliber rider of Marc Marquez can own your team, even if you had equal bikes, Marc Marquez going out there just winning and winning and winning is just showing that he is just such an elite athlete on such another level that is hard for his teammate to keep up. The Ducatis, we've said for the longest time, Cody, they have the best bike. Now you put in the best rider probably all time with Marc Marquez. I mean, it'll be crazy to think if it wasn't Marc Marquez, the battle we'll have in the championship between essentially Pecco Bagnaia and Alex Marquez, I mean, that one would be a lot more of a closer battle, but still, I want to say it's nearly 100 points, so it's not like that be the closest one we've seen, but I mean, gee whiz, Pecco retired. I can't remember the last time he got a podium, to be honest. It's been a while, so he's really, that's the why I feel for Ducati's sake, they're saying, we're really impatient with you because even if you're not getting those wins, we want you on the podium. Second place, third place. Why is a satellite Ducati team, the Gresini Racing Group, doing this much better? So I think there's pressure on both sides, frustrations on both sides. If he doesn't perform in 2026, especially, I'll say this, the first 5 races, if he's struggling, the rumors are going to start picking up who's going to be in that second Ducati seat, who's going to be Marc Marquez's teammate. That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, you mentioned not knowing when he last finished on the podium. I just checked over the stats, and Pecco scored a podium 6 races ago in Germany. He finished third, so that was the last time we've seen Pecco on the podium. And in the last 4 races, it hasn't gone great for him. He's finished 8th, 9th, 7th, and then a retirement. Yeah, so so Pecco is, searching for some good luck right now. It'll be interesting to see if he can overcome, and what's been a difficult year by Pecco Bagnaia standards, and it looks like Marquez could very well be like Max Verstappen, the teammate killer, in this situation. Because when you have someone like Marquez riding as well as he is, it's obviously going to be hard when you're compared to him. And we know in this style of motorsport, just like Formula One, you always compare it to how your teammate is doing it. When your teammate is on this level and you're on that level, the conversation is going to start, Joe. So I have to totally agree with you. Pecco, starts off next year and, isn't close to mark at all and just completely struggling. The rumors are going to pick up and we very well may see him out. And actually, I think Josh and Matt touched on this on Grid tonight. I think it was Josh who predicted that Pecco Bagnaia would end up leaving MotoGP and going to a different motorcycle racing series. I don't remember which series he said, but I'm pretty sure Josh said that he think Pecco would leave MotoGP and go compete in another series. So I have to go back and look at that episode of Grid tonight to see what series that was. And with that said, we'll put a bow on MotoGP for today. And Joe, the World Rally Championship Rally Chile just ended, and we have a winner from that event, and it's to no one's surprise.
Yeah, to no one's surprise, just coming in prior to the MotoGP section, Sebastian Ogier is your winner for Rally Chile. He entered the power stage with a good, healthy 4-second lead. He just kept building up more and more to where he got the win. Neuville came home in second, and Elfyn Evans is your third place finisher. Some other notables: Colin Rovanpera, 5th place, Formay, 7th place, and Autonic, 8th place. So overall, Rally Chile just getting completed. since that just wrapped up, we have not had the opportunity to do the grid ranking update, but that will be posted on social media. And of course, as we all know, Alex Palou is already your champion for 2025. So once we get that up, it'll be on Grid Network TV across social media. With that said, let's go ahead and bring Tanner in as it's time for our shining moments.
Yeah, that's right. It's time for our Grid One Shining Moment from this racing weekend. If you're watching here live or on delay later, let us know down in the chat. What's the one thing that stood out to you from this racing weekend? Whether it was from what the race that just wrapped up, Rally Chile World Rally Championship, the NASCAR's Bristol Night Race, the San Marino Grand Prix at Misano, or the Air Touch 500 at the Bend Endurance Race. Yeah, pick one from those or from another event that happened outside of the series we cover in the grid ranking. And starting with you, Tanner, what's your Grid One Shining Moment?
Thanks, Kobe. First, I want to do a quick shout out to the West Virginia Mountaineers football team for winning against Pittsburgh in the backyard brawl yesterday. But past that, let's stick to motorsports. I'm going to throw my one shining moment to Carson Hocevar in a race where aggression was really the name of the game. I watched all 500 laps yesterday, and I didn't see him really get into anybody. For a guy that's got such a reputation in the NASCAR Cup Series for being, over aggressive, overzealous, it was very impressive to see him put on such a great performance all night long and put himself in contention to win a race that really shouldn't have played into his or his team's skill set. Obviously, him being a young driver, tire management isn't really something that you would really think a young driver would have, a deft wheel with. But clearly, Carson Hocevar and his crew knew better than all of us and went on to put himself in position to win the race. Unfortunately, Zane Smith seemed precluded to put himself and Carson Hocevar out of the race for the win on that restart, and I really just don't understand it. I think that if you're Zane Smith, winning that race would have meant taking the bottom on the first couple of corners and also the second set of corners with 4 laps to go, but maybe he knows better than I do. Either way, though, Carson Hocevar put in an incredible effort and almost had a shot at his first victory, but alas, it was just not meant to be.
That's a great shining moment. I can tell you, not my shining moment. My South Carolina Gamecocks, number 11, losing to Vanderbilt, our biggest nemesis lately, the Commodores. Yeah. Way it goes. But my shining moment, my real shining moment, is going to come from NASCAR as well, too. Zane Smith and that team. What an effort they put up. We did our lightning round to question Front Row Motorsports. Would they get a car in the top 10, top 20? All of us was no. This team was motivated. They went out there and just makes me think of the potential, as you mentioned with your shining moment, Tanner. If this was the regular season cutoff race, these two racing for the win, not because they just lucked into it, but because they used strategy. They had a good car. It's a short track. Granted, still Christopher Bell did what he did. What an effort by this team. I would love to see this race swap for 3 weeks earlier. And for Zane Smith, I'm curious what he would do if he had equipment that could really give him a shot for victory lane. That is my shining moment.
And to keep it football theme to start off our answers, big shout out to my Charlotte 49ers for winning our first game of the season, being Monmouth University, and avoiding the embarrassment of being an FBS program losing to an FCS school. So I'm really happy I don't have to hear about that humiliation. And speaking of humiliation, hope my Carolina Panthers win their first game of the season after getting completely embarrassed last weekend in Jacksonville. So hopefully it'll be a double win for the Charlotte-based teams of mine. But getting back to the racing, I got 2 shining moments. Also want to give a quick shout out to Max Verstappen for taking on Nürburgring's intimidating Nordschleifer circuit and a Porsche Cayman GT4 car. Thought Max did a solid job. I stayed up late. I think it was like Friday night, Saturday morning, watching Max take on the Nordschleifer in that Porsche. Track conditions were not ideal. It was obviously raining in Germany, which isn't a surprise at all around this circuit, especially during this time of year. Max went in, did what he needed to do, and and got out of there, unscathed, which I'm sure his Red Bull team is really happy to see. And it was just really nice to see this moment happen, because it's so rare, not to just see, a Formula One driver, doing this, but it's really rare to see, an active Formula One driver in the middle of the season going out and racing in a completely different series, because this is something that, F1 teams don't usually like. They usually like their driver to stay focused on F1, and that's it. And I know we've seen Lance Stroll run the Rolex 24 a few times during his Formula One career. We also saw Fernando Alonso run Indianapolis 500 in the middle of his, F1 season in the past. So it's not uncommon to see this happen. It just very rarely happens. So kudos to Red Bull for allowing Max to come out here, race the Nordschleife. And in the future, if we have a Formula One Grand Prix race, not on the weekend, I'm sure the schedules come out for next year. I haven't really paid attention, but if he has an open weekend, I'd love to see him taking the Nürburgring 24 hours, whether it's next year or in the future when his Formula One career is over, and also some other endurance races. So I thought Max did a really good job at the Nordschleife. But my main shining moment, got to give a shout out to Heim time. Corey Heim saw a solid 10th place finish last night at Bristol, in a race, that was, really challenging with the tire management and all of that. Thought Corey, did the best that he could to get a solid finish out of that, and he was on fresh tires at the end. If things had gone his way on that restart, maybe Corey could have potentially challenged for the win. And for a driver who has fewer than 10 starts at the premier level, and someone who many believe deserve to be in this Cup Series full time, I think he proved exactly why last night he's deserving of an opportunity to move up to the Cup Series with Toyota in the future. And I think that last night's performance for Corey Heim is, first of many great performances we're going to see from him in the Cup Series in the future, and that's my shining moment.
Great shining moments. We thank everyone for tuning in, participating in the chat room, and of course, plenty of shows still coming up. Monday, Grid Encore. Ben and Brandon will have plenty to talk about, especially the Xfinity Series kicking off their playoffs. Wednesday, Grid Tonight. Kobe, Josh, and Matt White will be on the air for all the latest from motorsports news from around the world. And we'll do, again, NASCAR pre-race coverage from Loudon, New Hampshire. Going to be interested to see how that's going to turn out for the kickoff of the round of 12. Encourage everyone to subscribe. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs. Cross social media at Grid Network TV. GridNetworkTV.com. You can read Matthew Bro's article and invest into Grid Network through Patreon. Link in the video description. Colin, the show, Mark, Rob, David, and Matthew continue to invest in us, help us grow our media outlet. And of course, you can do super chat or buy me a coffee, and we'll thank you the next time we go on the air. For Kobe and Tanner, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.